As usual, there's a decrease in Goldlewis's defense modifier value, just like the rest of the cast, so now he takes less damage. In the old patch, he took 97 from that sequence. In the current patch, he takes this much damage. 90. So again, pretty on par for what we've been seeing so far. Goldlewis's 6 heavy slash has had its damage increased. In the previous version, it did 48 damage. For the new damage, it now does 56. Most of Goldlewis's changes revolve around how he interacts with his security level, so we're going to be talking about that first. Firstly, they've decreased the charging speed for security level 1 while increasing the charging speed at security level 2. So this means that Goldlewis will take longer to get access to his first level security level, but then, once he gets there, he'll be able to access security level 3 a little faster. It took about 3 seconds for him to get security level 1 in the previous patch, and then 7 seconds to get from security level 2 to security level 3. For the new patch, this is about the timing it takes to charge his security gauge. So now it takes roughly about the same amount of time for security level 1, albeit slightly slower, but again, the patch highlights that it's a slight difference. Meanwhile, the charging speed for security level 2 is actually about 2 seconds faster by my counting. Additionally, once Goldlewis uses a move that expends the security gauge, the timer is then put on a cooldown before the meter starts to regenerate, thus limiting the amount of security gauge that he gets. As you can see previously, Skyfish would expend it all and Goldlewis would be able to immediately regenerate it. For the current patch, you'll notice that there is a difference in terms of security level consumption by Skyfish. However, you also see that Goldlewis's timer is paused after he expends some of it. So this overall means that while Goldlewis is able to get access to his security level 3 faster, it is going to be offset by the fact that there is a cooldown period, thus making it so that there's a bit of meter management happening for Goldlewis players when it comes to choosing between all of his options that expend the security gauge. Goldlewis also receives a quality of life buff for his security levels. Before, if he was hit in the startup of one of his projectiles that consumed the security gauge, then he would lose that security level and the projectile with it, thus sort of double punishing the character for getting hit. This felt pretty bad for a Goldlewis player. Now, if Goldlewis is hit in the startup of the projectile before it becomes active, he won't lose any security level. This is a nice quality of life buff for Goldlewis that should make his failure states a little less punishing for players. These changes to security level for Goldlewis come on the back of a new mechanic that exists within the security levels themselves. He now has another way of spending them, and that comes with Behemoth Typhoon cancels. Now, there's some rules to these cancelings with Behemoth Typhoons that are important to understand for the matchup, so we're going to go ahead and explore those now. For starters, each Behemoth Typhoon cancel costs a full level of security. So this means that when Goldlewis is at maximum security, he has 3 cancels that he can do. There is a very important rule that Goldlewis must also follow as well for these Behemoth Typhoon cancels. That being that whatever rotational direction he starts with, he must cancel into that same rotational direction. While he is able to cancel into different versions of Behemoth Typhoons, he's not allowed to reverse that direction. So if you start by doing half-circle inputs in a clockwise motion, you can't then go in a counterclockwise motion for cancels. As you see, when I'm trying to do these reverse directional cancels, it doesn't work. However, this restriction by the durational rotation of your inputs doesn't necessarily limit Goldlewis and his mix-up options. So if we take a look, actually, we can see that Goldlewis has plenty of ways of making you choose between high and low defense options no matter what he starts with his Behemoth Typhoons. That was a mid into a low and an overhead. And that was an overhead into a low after the initial mid. So long as you're following the rule of going clockwise all the way or counterclockwise all the way, Goldlewis can basically pick which version he wants to do. And therefore, you're going to have to be reliant on your ability to recognize which version that Goldlewis is going for and react to the slower overheads in order to block them successfully. Do also keep in mind, too, that all these Behemoth Typhoons haven't lost their guard crush, which means they're doing plenty of chip damage while Goldlewis is doing these cancels. which is something I think is rather crazy. In a patch where some moves have lost their guard cancel properties, this felt like almost a prime candidate for removal as well, yet Goldlewis gets to keep this one, thus keeping his damage incredibly high on block. And as you might imagine, this potential cancel option does mean that Goldlewis's jump-ins or fuzzy setups are a lot more potent, because now he can choose how many overheads he wants to do, as well as their timings. And when you're given the right sort of resources and circumstance, you're able to do some incredibly crazy things, even from a full screen position when it comes to mixing the opponent on a jump-in. That was a cross-up, by the way. Tons of damage. At this point, it's also worth mentioning that every single version of Behemoth Typhoon has had its damage increased. Previously, they would do 52 damage to a full health Asuka. Now, they all do 60 damage, so an increase of 8 damage total. This isn't the wildest buff in damage that we've seen, but considering the fact that you're able to cancel these into themselves now, this greatly improves their overall damage, not just in an isolated case, but how they all are now able to link together so much more effectively than they were before. Because of all the new cancel options that Goldlewis has, various Behemoth Typhoons have had some of their properties adjusted to take advantage of the new potential links that Goldlewis is able to do. I'll go ahead and try to notify a few of the more notable ones that I've been able to find in my testing. The front-to-back clockwise motion Behemoth Typhoon now has the new blowback behavior on the latter half of its active frames. Traditionally, this move launches the opponent diagonal and upwards. However, in the second half of the active frames, when the coffin swings behind Goldlewis now, it will launch them directly upward. This is most noticeable when you go from down to up clockwise on the Behemoth Typhoon. So this should be able to allow Goldlewis to get some extensions here. The down to up clockwise Behemoth Typhoon now has new hitbox during the first half of the active frames. However, I haven't been able to find anything notably different with the character. So this change probably requires some sort of hitbox viewer in order to make full appreciation for it, and I'm sure there's going to be some Behemoth Typhoon cancel where this is going to be very applicable. His back to forward clockwise Behemoth Typhoon has new behavior on the first half of its active frames with blowback. It will now send the opponent flying forward. It's very useful for when he's canceling from a down to up clockwise Behemoth Typhoon, thus launching the opponent back forward. They've also increased this Behemoth Typhoon's horizontal range. Previously, 3 backdash spaces away and Goldlewis would whiff. And now, it will reach. So this gives Goldlewis more effective range to poke with this overhead, as well as be able to threaten it from sequences where the opponent is trying to FD him out of. They've also changed some collision with this move. The patch notes directly say, adjusted timing when the proximity requirement preventing it from hitting opponents to the front is removed to make this happen later. I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to mean for Goldlewis, as I'm sure there's something out there that a Goldlewis expert would be able to explain when it comes to this behavior. His up to down clockwise Behemoth Typhoon has some changes on blowback as well. It would behave like this previously. It would launch the opponent straight downwards with a little bit of horizontal movement with a ground bounce effect. Now, this move instead does horizontal blowback to the opponent with no ground bounce. So this means that it's going to be more of a launcher style of move for Goldlewis, and it probably has good interactions with some of his other Behemoth Typhoon cancels. Though I do see with this horizontal blowback, it also probably would have nerfed some potential links that Goldlewis could have had without this change. Additionally, this Behemoth Typhoon will always send the opponent in front of Goldlewis if it hits them from behind now. This is pretty useful for some of his potential cancels. Just to give ideas. His up to down counterclockwise Behemoth Typhoon has some changes to its blowback as well during the first half of its active frames. As you can see before from that sequence, it would launch the opponent upwards and over Goldlewis's head, giving him the ability to sideswap using this previously. There was also a bit of frame advantage he would get because of the ground bounce at the bottom of it. Here's how the behavior currently looks. Now it no longer launches the opponent upwards, but instead just pulls him straight backwards into Goldlewis, preventing him from being able to use this to side swap. Additionally, there's less frame advantage to work with because there is no more ground bounce on this. This seems like a nerf to me, but I imagine that within the context of Goldlewis's entire kit, there's probably some new functionality he can get thanks to his security level cancels with Behemoth Typhoons. His back to forward counterclockwise Behemoth Typhoon has some changes to its own blowback on the first active frames. Previously, it would launch the opponent like this. The second hit is the first half of the active frames when the coffin first becomes an active hitbox, and as you can see, it launches the opponent even farther away from Goldlewis in the previous patch. This is the current patch behavior of this move now. It launches the opponent straight downwards and into a ground bounce, which should open up opportunities for Goldlewis to do security level cancels and to follow up Behemoth Typhoons. As you can imagine, with all of these changes interacting together, some high-level Goldlewis players should be able to figure out some saucy-looking combos. Here's Not Pichu FGC with an example of one such combo. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked that this didn't kill Chip, but I suppose that's something to be thankful for, I guess, in this patch. Again, visually, this looks pretty cool. 3 of Goldlewis's aerial Behemoth Typhoons have had their recovery slightly increased. His down to up clockwise, his up to down counterclockwise, and his down to up clockwise. However, in my testing, it seems like this is a very marginal increase, and the patch notes themselves even say that this is a slight extension due to the window for following up with a Behemoth Typhoon cancel. So I think this is namely there to make sure that Goldlewis is able to consistently get multiples of these on jump-ins. But I'm not entirely sure of the functionality here, so if there's a Goldlewis main out there who's able to more accurately summarize these changes and note their impact on the actual gameplay of Goldlewis, we'd appreciate it in the comments below. Thunderbird has one change, and that's that the timing for when it consumes the security level will now happen later. This is in line with the changes we talked about before to ensure that Goldlewis doesn't lose his security level for getting hit out of the startup of his projectiles. However, I do think that Thunderbird, in its own way, is kind of nerfed in this patch, simply because now it has to compete as a resource against Goldlewis being able to use Behemoth Typhoons. Once you summon Thunderbird, it pretty much consumes all of your security level at once, which means that what do you value more, a fully powered up Thunderbird or 2 cancels for Behemoth Typhoons? Skyfish has some behavior changes, so let's go ahead and look at those. Previously, if you use Skyfish, it would immediately consume all of your security level. Doing so added extra bullets to it, about 10 bullets per level. Obviously, this would be fairly terrible for Goldlewis to have this old behavior in the current patch, given the fact that he wants to hold on to security level to do Behemoth Typhoon cancels now. So instead, they made Skyfish gradually deplete the security level by making it deplete some for every 3 bullets shot. Because of this, Goldlewis is able to do more damage and fire more bullets while having more control over how many he fires. At max security level, he's now able to fire 51 bullets, dealing 103 damage. Additionally, if he does this entire sequence, no matter what the wall health is, he's able to completely break the wall. So there's possibly some utility for Goldlewis here. Although it is important to note that you have to pretty much expend an entire level 3. As if you don't have max security level, you won't get that wall break on Skyfish. The ability for Goldlewis to control how many bullets Skyfish fires actually gives him a lot of combo flexibility as well near the corner. Here is Cheerio, TNS's very own top-level Goldlewis player, demonstrating a combo you could use. It's actually pretty flashy, and while I'm pretty sure that people would be upset about seeing yet another Goldlewis TOD, I have to remind people of how impractical it is to have this sort of positioning with full tension gauge at the start of a round. But more to the point, if you do get this hit and the enemy has less life than that, well, yeah, they're guaranteed dead, but I'm pretty sure most of the cast could also kill with those resources there. It is still pretty cool to see, in my opinion. It's also worth noting that right now there's two bugs that exist with Skyfish. One of them is causing the camera to break and thus basically makes the game into an unplayable state because the characters get launched into the background of the next map after the stage switch itself. Arc System Works has stated that they'll be fixing these bugs sometime after November 18th. The specific date of these bug fixes will come after November 15th. This is sort of a resurgence of a previous wall break glitch that existed in earlier versions of Guilty Gear Strive. I had to give my homeboy Akito Base a shout out for actually putting together a funny little montage showcasing this glitch with Goldlewis. As you can imagine, this is fairly game-breaking since it completely ruins the game camera, but it is also a hilarious thing to behold. Like other projectiles, Burn It Down will now deplete the security level later in its animation to ensure that Goldlewis doesn't lose his security level if he gets hit out of this. Pretty much as soon as I got the input to register and Goldlewis took his stance, the security level went down in the previous version. As for the current version, the security level basically depleted once the camera zoomed in on Goldlewis's face. This is a nice quality of life buff for the character. Goldlewis is a character that I feel like a lot of people have a negative bias towards simply because of the way that his pressure works. Putting you into a constant state of guard crush over and over again and cycling through offense that chips away at your health, making you feel like you're in a lose situation is certainly a frustrating element to it. And instead of trying to address that, Arc System Works has instead given the character extra tools to play with. I feel like that this is the beginning of a interesting change for the character because now that his security level has so many different ways of being used in his kit between Burn It Down, Thunderbird, Skyfish, and now Behemoth Typhoon cancels, I feel like that there's a lot of ways that a Goldlewis player can express themselves with a security level that can maybe give each individual player a little more of a unique identity. However, considering the high damage as well as chip damage that these Behemoth Typhoons currently do, I feel like this is a massive overtuning for a character that was already doing pretty good before. I can understand Arc System Works wants a character who is generally slower and is going to struggle in some matchups where the opponent is able to keep him out to want to be successful and dominating once he actually gets in against the opponent, highlighting strengths and weaknesses. But I feel like in this particular example, the strengths don't necessarily get held back by the weaknesses as much as they completely overshadow them. Personally, I would like to see that these Behemoth Typhoons, or at the very least the canceled up security level follow-ups, don't have the guard crush property on them just to potentially give the opponent a little more of a viable way to relax under pressure and not suffer so much chip damage going forward. Or for these Behemoth Typhoons to not have seen a damage increase because again, the stated vision for the patch that Arc System Works put out was to increase the number of interactions, but we're seeing that Goldlewis is able to put the opponent into guess for game situations very quickly and early on within a round as long as he has the right resources. So again, I feel like this is a cool direction to take the character, but I feel like in its current state, it is arguably a bit overtuned. Due to his matchup spread, I don't think Goldlewis is going to be a top 5 character, but he's certainly going to feel that way once he puts you under his Behemoth Typhoon pressure.